Welcome to the MonsterVerse recap. Following its chronological theatrical release, meaning we will jump over different timelines. It is scientist Joe Brody's birthday. He lives with his wife Sandra and their son Ford. On this fateful day, he is forced to close the containment area with poisonous gas, therefore trapping Sandra inside as she worked in the region, and the plant explodes. They were quickly evacuated. In the present day, 15 years later, Ford returns from his service as a lieutenant, now being sent to Japan as Joe had just been arrested for entering the containment area. He is bailed out, and Joe convinces him to enter the zone with him to gather a photo of his mother, Sandra, and he realizes that there is zero radiation emission in the region, and they are consequently arrested. Joe screams about how he knows there is something out there, and he doesn't want to speak with the detective. In the midst of this, the egg in the region cracks. A Muto is released and wreaks carnage, killing Joe just before it flies off. Dr. Serizawa, the mastermind behind the eggs and a part of Monarch, is enlisted by Admiral Stans to help eliminate the Mutos, explaining that centuries ago, when the monsters were alive, they ruled the land, absorbing the radiation and growing to great lengths. They held themselves underground to hibernate and remained there until now, but he believes that the original one, Gojiro or Godzilla, will restore balance to the earth. He had risen as a result of the Mutos and the atomic bomb testings. The researchers were in Monarch. As another Muto hatches, they realize the male one is the one with wings. They want to use the atomic bomb to try and lure it out, then detonate it. During this carnage, Elle and Sam are awaiting his return in San Francisco. Ellie is separated from Sam, getting evacuated to a different zone. Crossing a crumbling bridge, Ellie remains at the hospital to assist the patients and to wait for Ford. He is flown there for the mission, as they use the atomic bomb to lure Godzilla into fighting the Mutos. The Mutos get to the atomic bomb first, however, but as it is too close to the city, Lieutenant Brody, a bomb specialist, is sent in to retrieve it and push it out to sea. As Godzilla and the Mutos fight erupt into the city, he smashes the male Muto into the building, impaling it and ending its life. Just as they push the bomb out to sail, the female Muto catches up to Ford. As he is about to be eaten, Godzilla stops its jaw, using its atomic heat beam to melt through the Muto's exoskeleton and decapitating it, and Ford makes it back to get Sam and reunite with Elle, as they watch Godzilla walk back to the ocean and swim away. Decades before the Gojiro incident, Bill Randa, a scientist, discovered a new plot of land that they named Skull Island. He is accompanied by his associates, Houston and Sand. He is funded by the military on his expedition and protected by Preston Packard's unit. As they embark, they enlisted a tracker, ex-Captain James, and a photographer, Mason Weaver. This group ventured into the Skull Island. Beyond the thundering mist, they drop seismic bombs to test the ground density, but helicopters are quickly disposed of by a giant gorilla. 3 groups survive, James with Mason, Preston with some of his platoon, and Jack Chapman alone with their ammunition. Their rescue point is north of the island, and they need to arrive there within 3 days. Preston quickly finds out that these large monsters are all over the globe, but hidden from society. They meet Hank Marlowe, a fellow soldier stuck on the island since the Vietnam War. It has been decades, and to honor his friend Gunpei, he takes his blade with him as they depart on a boat built with the parts of their planes. As the sea is governed by an octopus, they reunite with the groups, figuring out that Preston isn't trying to escape but defeat Kong. The island views Kong differently. He is seen as the protector and the one that restores balance, saving them from the skull crawlers. He is the last of his kind, as the big one had murdered his entire race. When they reach Chapman, he is sadly gone, eaten by a skullcrawler. They make their track back as Preston forces his troop on a detour to try and finish off Kong with napalm. However, James and Mason make it back to them and try to stop them, but
bitch, please!
As they watch the big one rise from the ocean, they quickly scatter off as Preston is crushed and Kong fights with him. Kong eventually loses. The big one chases them down. As Kong catches up, it is decimated and he finishes off the big one by ripping out its intestines, even rescuing Mason after she had fell into the ocean. He allows them to leave. James and Mason are locked away. They are forced to join Monarch, a government-funded secret organization that was headed by Bill Randa, and searches for massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, showing photos of ancient monsters that are still out there. Just after the events of Kong Skull Island, Hero and Cap take on a mission to find Skull Island. Hero's son is Mike and Cap's son is Charlie. Skeptical of the island, they take their sons on this voyage. They encounter a girl in handcuffs named Annie, claiming her dog will find them. As their ship is crushed by a sea monster, they wash up on shore. Everyone except Hero, who was lost at sea, is washed up on Skull Island. Separated from them, Cap runs into Irene, the person who dispatched them for this mission. They aim to get off the island, but before that, they need to catch the girl. Cap is their new captive. They encounter multiple monsters, like the crabs on the beach and giant snails. Most prominent of all, King Kong and the ruler of the sea, the Kraken that won't let them escape. Annie catches up with her dog, whom she named Dog. They are best friends because they were both abandoned at a young age and stuck together. They make quick work of the mercenaries, and the survivors alarm Irene of the girl and the 2 teenage boys assisting her. They plan to make a trap, using a hawk to grab the dog and retrieving the girl peacefully. Mike starts to get symptoms of poisoning from the Kraken when he had endured the hit, and their ship was crushed. They are lured out by the mercenaries. Annie is tranquilized, and the dog is snatched off by the hawk. Mike sacrifices himself to allow Charlie to go free, telling Cap that Charlie is fine. As the mercenaries leave the area, he is also snatched by the hawk, placed in a temple with Dog. Even with hatred for each other, they band together to escape Kong's temple. For the present, Annie wakes up, dreaming of the moment when her father left to fend off the monsters on the island, on a similar island they were stranded on. Irene admits that she is her mother. She was trying to find her for over 10 years, using all the resources and money she had. Shocked by this news, also at the same moment, Dog and Charlie find the village. They put their feelings aside, banding together with the aim of getting off Skull Island. They strategize to try and escape, using Kong to fight the Kraken by luring him out with his favorite amulet. He treasures this amulet because decades ago, when he befriended a human, the moment he left, her village was attacked by the Kraken and she died in his hands, leaving the amulet behind. They successfully steal the amulet and get Kong to fight the Kraken by throwing the amulet inside the ocean, but as a result, Mike dies as he succumbs to his wounds. Annie and her dog are knocked out during this fight. Several weeks later, she wakes up in a hospital, back in civilization. We skip time back to after the Godzilla incidents. In the wake of the world discovering Monarch and the organization trying to secretly contain these monsters, people are torn as Congress gathers a hearing on if they should allow the Monarch division to continue conducting business on monsters, or if they should allow the military to take over and dispose of them. Ishiro Serizawa is joined by Vivian Graham and their attorney Sam Coleman, but they rush out as a containment facility had been attacked and a monster, Mothra, had just been released, all named the Queen of the Monsters. Scientist Emma Russell and her daughter Madison had also been kidnapped. Their family grew apart after they lost their son Andrew during the Godzilla attack in 2014. They coped differently. Mark turned to the bottle and she gained a savior complex. He is asked to rejoin Monarch and save them and the planet. They receive signals that Godzilla has woken and is swimming to Antarctica, the worst of all containments, even kept off the books. King Ghidorah, another apex predator. They fly there and find all the soldiers in the facility deceased. The troops are ambushed. Russell runs in, fueled with the goal of saving his family, but he encounters the kidnappers, namely British Army Colonel Alan Jonah, that went rogue trying to stop the Titans from taking over the planet. He fueled his operation through trafficking Titan DNA. In their standoff, Madison decides against going with her father, and willingly, Emma releases King Ghidorah as they flee with the Orca, with the ability to control the monsters by using different pitches of sound to agitate them or imitate other monsters. The respective groups escape as the Godzilla and King Ghidorah fight breaks out, but Vivian Graham is crushed as a casualty of war. Godzilla is overpowered and barely escapes. Emma gets on a call with them to admit that she is trying to save the globe. Mankind has caused pollution and waste in its path. With the carnage came growth and the environment flourished. Unwilling to fault from her viewpoint, as they travel across the globe releasing more monsters as Ghidorah calls them out and they listen to him as king. During this, Madison sees the flaws in her ideology and tries to convince her to stop, but she is shut out. She secretly steals the Orca, sneaking out and setting it up in a stadium where the shrieks reverberate across the country, challenging King Ghidorah. Meanwhile, to help revive Godzilla, they travel to his habitat near the Earth's core, and to do this, they must use their thermonuclear warhead. But with this, their armament propulsion has been damaged, and without any time, as King Ghidorah has started wreaking carnage on the country, Serizawa decides to individually deliver the thermonuclear warhead to Godzilla and revive him by detonating it. As a tribute to Vivian, he thanks Godzilla as the warhead detonates. Ghidorah had reached the stadium and started destroying Boston, as Maddie ran away with the Orca. They follow Godzilla to the remnants of the stadium, looking for Maddie, but they find the Orca, and assisted by Emma's new change of heart, they find Maddie at the abandoned house, where they fix the broken Orca to buy time for Godzilla to fight Ghidorah, as he had been knocked out once again. During this, Mothra sacrifices herself to give her life force to Godzilla, and he absorbs it. As he starts regenerating, the crew uses the Orca to lure Ghidorah away, but as they reach the plane, guilty for all the damage she has caused, Emma stays behind, using a vehicle to attract Ghidorah away from her family and Godzilla. She is eventually crushed, muttering, "Long live the king." Godzilla successfully fully rejuvenates himself, crushing Ghidorah, even eating his head. The monsters now recognize him as king, king. Roughly 2 years have passed ever since Godzilla became the king of the monsters, and they all went into hibernation. But one fateful day, Godzilla comes out of hibernation, attacking an Apex cybernetics facility. The press and military believe this to be an unprovoked attack, and use this case as a reason for why they should erase all of the Titans. Meanwhile, Kong had been moved from Skull Island to a similarly looking containment facility in Hong Kong, but he realized this by breaking portions of the ceiling panels. Apex CEO Walter Simmons recruits former Monarch scientist and Hollow Earth theorist Nathan Lin to guide a search for a power source into the Hollow Earth, a rumored place where Titans live. With his connections, Lin convinces Andrews, a scientist working alongside Kong, to let him guide them through the Hollow Earth as he had lived there previously, and they chained him up, dosing him with high amounts of sedatives. But they encounter another obstacle. Godzilla has come to reclaim his throne and fights with King Kong. He incapacitates him during the ocean battle and leaves him alive to assert his dominance. The crew quickly airlifts him to the entrance of the Hollow Earth as he guides them through, using their Hollow Earth aerial vehicle. They are led into the kingdom where Kong's super species used to reside. He gathers a glowing battle axe and activates it with the radiation from the Hollow Earth. They begin digging as Godzilla, noticing this disruption, blasts his beam into the ground to delay them. They successfully escape and return to the Hollow Earth's power source for them to activate Mechagodzilla, powered in Ghidorah's skull. But as they turn it on, Ren Serizawa, the pilot, is immediately electrocuted, and Ghidorah takes over control of the Mechagodzilla. While this was happening, Madison and Josh met up with Bernie, a podcaster that worked for Apex Cybernetics, to try and figure out why Godzilla attacked the lab, sneaking in to find Mechagodzilla just as it started rampaging and destroying the facility. Engaging with Godzilla just after he had fought tirelessly to defeat Kong once more, they are able to deactivate him by pouring liquor all over the control panel. As Kong and Godzilla team up, he blasts the Titan axe with his beam, turning it molten and easily slicing through the Mechagodzilla suit. They now like each other symbiotically, as after the battle, Godzilla leaves Kong and resides in the ocean as he allows Kong to rule Hollow Earth. After all the chaos, Maddie reunites with her father. The series jumps across multiple points in history. Starting in 1952, Lee Shaw, an officer, was sent overseas to guard scientist Keiko in the Philippines. On their trip, they run into another scientist, Bill, investigating the radiation. They are attacked by one of the first few monsters, and once they escape, the trio creates a division called Monarch. The army begins to sponsor them once they show proof of the Titan species, but they were duped, and the army began testing weapons on a Titan, Godzilla. Believing it was dead after detonating an atomic bomb, they cease funding to Monarch. Bill falls in love with Keiko, they get married, and he adopts her secret son, Hiroshi. He discovers that secret tunnels exist between Titans hiding in their planet. As they test his theory, they realize Godzilla is still alive. Years later, they investigate an abandoned power plant in Kazakhstan, believed to be an entrance to the monster world, but like scientist Brody predicted, the region doesn't contain radiation, and under the ground, they find a nest of Mudo eggs. An earthquake starts, and as a result, Keiko falls in. They assume she is gone. In 1962, the scientists locate a wormhole crossing the different realms. It only activates once a Titan approaches. They manipulate a capsule-like device to explore the dimension. With Lee Shaw as one of the crew members, the results are horrendous. Immediately upon entering the wormhole, it closes and the teleporter explodes. Bill spends years figuring out a solution, but it is indefinite. And in the events of Skull Island in 1973, Bill was eaten by a skullcrawler. He left the Monarch's secret documents behind for Hiroshi, and Lee Shaw wakes up from his coma, explaining that they traveled to the Axis Mundi, a world between worlds where physics works differently, and spontaneously the entire crew was slowly taken out. He was the sole survivor until one day a random portal opened up and he was pulled out. The now adult Hiroshi doesn't believe this, and even though he is a friend of Bill's, they place him into a mental ward. Hiroshi's daughter, Kate, is all grown up now. Hearing of the fateful news that her father's plane had recently crashed, she travels to Japan to settle his affairs. But after entering the house, she figures out that he had another family on the side, and she has a half-brother named Kentaro. They go through Hiroshi's office, finding gigabytes of data. They don't know how to decrypt it, so they ask Kentaro's friend May for help. As she hacks into the Monarch system, it alerts them, finding an armed force member named Lee Shaw. Running from Monarch, Lee, now older, agrees to help them, trying to search for Hiroshi, but they are stranded, and Monarch rescues them, but also imprisons them. But Monarch is a government organization that allows them to leave. Duval, an agent, secretly goes behind Monarch's back and assists Lee Shaw in his goal of defeating the Titans. To gather more information on where Hiroshi is, they travel to his abandoned office in San Francisco. They use a map to identify Hiroshi's location in Kazakhstan. The group join him, but as quick as they get there, he flees Apex, as he had built a device to call for titans, like Godzilla. Without Hiroshi, Lee Shaw prompts him with the idea of decimating all the titans, but they are against it, so he steals their map and heads off. Tim and Natalia Verdugo, Monarch executives, estimate that he will cause mass hysteria with this. They strike a deal for the team to assist her in stopping Shaw's plan for May. She used to work for Apex and saw the inhumane practices and locked their files away. They release May, tracking Shaw back in their abandoned nuclear plant with all the Muto eggs. They try to convince him to stop, but he blows up the portal, and May, Kate, and Lee fall in, entering the Astus Mundi, and they find Keiko, but in a moment of realization, he sacrifices himself to allow the others to leave by luring out the Titans and tossing the abandoned capsule out. They come out to find Apex Cybernetics there to assist them, but an alarm rings for them to hide as King Kong has come out to play on Skull Island. This is where the show ends. Make sure to subscribe, and for more action-filled shows, watch this.